Hey, also, after years of bike packing on a full suspension mountain bike, an extra small one at that, for the first time ever, I have tried out using a rear rack to carry my stuff. It's October here in central Idaho, and I'm on day 4 of a single track heavy loop in the Trinity Mountains, Sawtooth Mountains, and Smoky Mountains. And Kurt and I are up here at Paradise Peak after a 3,000-foot climb, finishing our 25,000 feet of climbing and descending for the trip. And here is what I think about the rack and how I've used it on this. So, big picture, extra small bike, 5 inches of travel on this pivot, Trail 429. As always, in my handlebar bag, I have my sleep kit, but because of the rack, that's all I have up here. And then frame bag has food and water sometimes, repair stuff and first aid, and the down tube bag, more food and my jerry can. And then in the rack, unlike past trips where I haven't had this capacity, I've been able to put my titanium pot and stove up here, loaded closer to the center of gravity of the bike. And then I have layers because it's October and quite cold, despite it being warm right now, filling the rest of the volume. And then this is an Old Man Mountain Elkhorn rack. And one thing to note is that compared to maybe a setup you've seen on my gravel bike, is that the rack has to be entirely mounted to this rear triangle, because when you go through the travel of a full suspension bike, the rear travel, the rear triangle moves independently. So if the rack was mounted to the seat post, you would probably break the rack, hopefully the rack rather than the bike. But that would be fixing this point and you wouldn't get that movement. So that's how it's set up. One thing that I realized pretty quickly was that being able to go through almost 5 inches of travel, as I move through the travel, the rack moves closer to my saddle. And so where you mount this bag has to be far enough back, which means the rack also has to be far enough back over the rear tire that you can go through all your travel without having the bag hit your saddle when you go through all your travel. As far as performance, a balanced bike always feels good, and so it was really nice having weight in the front of my bike and weight in the back of my bike. It really felt like my bike was anchored to the ground. Good things about that is when you're climbing and you feel like you can maintain traction really well, you're descending, you maintain traction really well. And with the additional weight kind of penalty of a rack in the back on a full suspension bike on trail, I definitely noticed that it was harder to move the rear end around for it to feel playful. And that rear tire really does want to stick to the ground. And then one other kind of bike handling thing I noticed, I never really have much room to get behind my saddle, being with a 29-inch rear wheel. And then with this rack, there was very little room for me to move backwards. And as I moved through the travel, I could feel the rack moving up towards my butt. And that was always when it was steepest or most technical. So that was just something I had to kind of learn to anticipate, so I wasn't getting surprised by getting bumped in the butt right as I was going down something. And then I think one thing that's just really worth noting is that while there are certainly times in the summer, especially when I don't need as much layers, that it's nice to not have the weight and bulk back here. It was really nice to be bikepacking mid-October in the mountains and to be warm and to be able to carry 3 days of food and all the clothes I need. And so that made it entirely worth it.